Good morning and welcome everybody for another session, this time presented by Angela Dugan, a senior DPE from Microsoft. Today she's going to go through curing and testing tools with Visual Studio and TFS 2010, and we're going to see Visual Studio Test Manager 2010 in play and learn a few other tricks of the trade. Just a thank you to our sponsors for their continued support, and the last event of June after Angela here is of course Scott Gothrie's Unplugged event. It is his 9th session and it's on the 23rd of June. This is his first virtual session for LIDNUG, his first Q&A since moving over to the Azure team, and I'm sure there's going to be quite a few people interested in attending this one here. And that's on the 23rd of June. As usual, all of our links and details, I'll bring this up again later on in the event as well. If there's any question for anything, feel free to ping me directly or email me at brian@lidnug.org, or if you want to reach the general question about LIDNUG, info@lidnug.org. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. And it's twitter.com/LIDNUG and facebook.com/LIDNUG. Anyways, I want to thank you guys for coming and showing up. By now everybody's probably heard that the Connect SDK has just been launched. They started their event half an hour ago, of course conflicting a bit with us. So thank you for taking the time and coming over here. And thank you to Angela. Angela, thank you very much for coming on board and presenting to us.
Yeah, I know. Thanks for having me out. I'm just going to switch over to some of my slides now. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I realize I am kind of bumping up against something pretty popular, so the Connect announcements and all that is going on right now. So I appreciate spending some time with me. I'm talking about something that's probably a little different in terms of what the folks within DPE like myself have normally been talking about. Usually we're fairly focused on developer-related topics, but some of the new stuff that we've come out with is pretty darn cool, even if you're a developer. Sometimes people think, oh, well, that's really just for QA folks. That's really not for me. There's certainly some really exciting stuff for developers as well. So I want to make sure that everyone's kind of had a good chance to go through, see what's coming out, hear about some of the features there are, and some of this may very well be very relevant for you. So we're going to be talking mostly about Visual Studio 2010 Test Manager. We'll spend a little time talking about lab management, some time talking about Visual Studio. I'll be showing off some of our new coded UI functional automation testing tools. We'll also be talking about Team Foundation Server 2010. So just to give you a little bit of background about me, this is my first presentation with LIDNUG. So my name is Angela Dugan. I work for Microsoft. I've been here for about 5 years now. Before that, I actually worked for a small consulting firm just outside of Chicago, Illinois for about 8.5 years. My background is actually computer science. But I'm really enjoying being part of the evangelism team here at Microsoft now. So I am an ALM product specialist. We're great with 3-letter acronyms. So just to give you a preview of what that is, that's called Application Lifecycle Management. That is the product set that I focus on. So I talk about Visual Studio and TFS more from an application lifecycle management perspective than pure coding. I do have some awesome counterparts that talk about Silverlight and Windows Phone and NuGet and WebMatrix and a lot of other great technologies. So that's certainly something that I can help find presenters for if people are interested in. But just to differentiate a little bit as to what I cover. So again, I am based in the United States in Chicago, Illinois. I actually cover 3 different states in the area, so I do a lot of road trips. Again, I've been in the software industry for about, going on 14 years now. And outside of Microsoft, I actually have quite a few things going on as well, so some shameless self-promotion down at the bottom. I do run some user groups if you happen to be local to Chicago. I know I had a couple of friends I had told about the event. They might be coming. So I do run a couple of Team Foundation Server groups in Indianapolis and Chicago. I am looking to start one in Milwaukee, Wisconsin as well. I also run the local Chicago Girls in Tech group with a good friend of mine. We have both Facebook and Twitter accounts if anyone is interested in seeing what that's about. And last but not least, I have a couple things that are a little more related to my Microsoft persona, as I call it. So I have a Microsoft developer information Facebook site where what I do is I essentially consolidate all of the kind of interesting events that I see in terms of development, testing, architecture, anything around Microsoft technologies that are happening in the area or online. That's both on Facebook and Twitter. And I do have a blog. I'm not nearly as active on it as I used to be. Now that I've gotten into Facebook and Twitter, I seem to blog a little bit less, but I do tend to, put some pretty good stuff out there. One of my more recent ones is a blog all about MSDN benefits and making sure that you're taking advantage of them. So I'll talk a little bit about that at the end, just because I find a ton of people are just letting those benefits go and they're not really taking advantage of the training and support. So I'll talk a little bit about that at the end too. So to jump a little bit more into, relevant topical information. So when I talk about Visual Studio ALM tools, this is actually the product set that I talk about, so it's still a pretty broad scope. So Team Foundation Server is at its core. I'm pretty sure you guys have already had some Team Foundation Server sessions, so I won't be spending a ton of time diving deep on super specific functionality within the tools. But I do want to talk about it just at a high level in case there's folks on the phone who are going, I don't really know what Team Foundation Server is, and I'm not really familiar with what Visual Studio has. And just a quick note as well, I will be monitoring the Q&A panel. I'll try to break in there every 15 minutes or so, and if there's some good contextual questions, I'll make sure to get those answered. So just to make people aware, there is a Q&A panel that you can use if you have questions. Otherwise, I'll make sure that we go through some questions at the end as well. So what you're looking at here is essentially everything that I cover from an application lifecycle management stack. So that includes Visual Studio, Office, Expression, SharePoint. We have some custom Windows and web tools for accessing Team Foundation Server, and then of course Team Foundation Server itself. So kind of the $2 tour of the ALM tools is that Team Foundation Server is our collaborative hub. So it's a tool that I tend to call it the man behind the curtain. It's SQL Server based. It serves as a place where you can store all of your project assets. So version control, test cases, build scripts, requirements, tasks, all the things that you and everyone on your team have to work with and manage to build software every day. And one of the cool things about Team Foundation Server that some people may not realize is that it's also platform and language agnostic. It doesn't care if it's .NET. You could store Java and COBOL, PHP. You can store just about anything you want in there. You could probably just manage your MP3 library if you wanted to as well. Again, at the end of the day, it's just a database system. What else that's going to give you on top of that is not only being able to kind of manage your assets, but to be able to share those with the team members through a lot of different interfaces. So we're going to cover a few of those today. We're really going to be focusing on Test Professional. We'll be looking a little bit at Visual Studio and mainly the Test Manager and Visual Studio tools. I'll talk a little bit about SharePoint and Office as well, just so you can see how those things trickle up as well from a QA and testing perspective. So to drill down a little bit more into the testing capabilities, we have quite a few, especially now that we have 2010 out. So that's been out for about a year now. We have quite a few functions that are around testing, whether you're a generalist tester all the way through to what we call the specialist tester spectrum. So across the top, you might notice that going from left to right, there's kind of a range, right? So we start with generalists on the left. Generalist testing means these are folks who don't necessarily have a computer science background. Day to day, they might be doing testing, doing ad hoc exploratory testing. Maybe they have Word documents or an Excel spreadsheet or maybe SharePoint that they're using to manage all their manual tests. As you move to the right, we go towards the specialist testers. So everything from, doing some real simple JavaScript or VB script all the way up to writing full-blown C# and VB.NET code. So we're going to cover a little bit of everything today in terms of what's available for both non-technical folks as well as technical folks. Now you'll notice as I start to build up the slide, we essentially have some color coding going on. Anything that you see in purple is essentially stuff that's been around for quite a while now. Anything that pops up in blue are going to be a lot of the functions that we're starting to add with kind of our latest release in 2010. So while we do certainly have some some additional things that were added to Team Foundation Server to support testing. TFS has been around for about 6 years now. It's actually been around longer than that. We've been using it internally for a while before we kind of released it out into the wild. But in terms of general availability, it's been out since 2005. So the idea is Team Foundation Server, again, is just a collaborative hub where you're storing test cases, source code, build scripts, user stories, requirements, bugs, things like that. On top of Team Foundation Server, we have a bunch of client tools that can be used to build test cases that Team Foundation Server can manage and automatically run for you. So some of the things that we've had for a while now are things like web performance testing. So being able to do, testing performance of your web application. So anything that's running in a Windows environment, testing for things like errors, for speed, for, the performance of the server itself. We also have load testing, so the ability to kind of harness up any automated test type, scale that out, do performance testing, load testing, stress testing, all of those things. That's included in Visual Studio as well as simple unit testing. So that's a feature that we've actually had for a while now. Now, some things that we've recently added in 2010 that I'm going to talk about today are data collectors. So the ability to set up some automatic data collection that's happening in the background as you're running a test. We'll deep dive on where that gets set up and how to do that. There's some really exciting new data collection that you can enable as part of your testing, whether it's manual testing or automated testing. We also have a new capability called lab management. Lab management is actually an add-on to Team Foundation Server. So lab management is to put it simply, is a way to help you manage your labs, whether they're physical or virtual, so you can create kind of a template that you can use to recreate environments that you might have to test against. So for instance, different operating systems, different browsers, things so that you can make sure that your applications will run in a number of different types of environments. We also have test case management. This is also an aspect of Team Foundation Server. So the idea here is that, in the past, we've managed bugs and tasks and source code and builds very well in Team Foundation Server, but there wasn't really a good mechanism for doing pure test case management. So not only creating test cases, being able to plan and manage them. What is your plan of attack for executing them? Who's executing them? When do they need to be done? That can now be done through the test professional interface, but is managed by Team Foundation Server as well. Now, a couple of last things to add. We have very robust supporting for running manual tests. That may sound a little strange because you're thinking, well, it's manual. What is there to manage? I'll show you how we have some really great snap-ins to allow you to more easily access your manual tests, to run them side by side with your application, to automatically collect data, and a really easy way to create extremely rich bugs. And last but not least, another new thing that we've added in 2010 is coded UI testing. So I'll be doing a demo of that today as well. With coded UI testing, we're just essentially taking a functional user interface test for both Windows and web and being able to automate that using a full-blown Visual Studio with managed.NET code. So it's already going to be code and techniques that you're familiar with. Now you can automate a lot of the manual tests that normally you would have to do with something like Excel or Word. So that's kind of a quick overview of some of the things that we'll be covering today. So the first thing I want to look at is test planning, right? What is test planning and how do we support it? Again, test plans are essentially managed using Visual Studio Test Professional as a front end, but it is managed in Team Foundation Server. Again, these are assets that we need to manage in that database. We need to give access to everyone on the team and give you a really great way to not only track the changes, but to also be able to create relationships between things. That way we can have traceability from our requirements to our test cases, to our source code, to our bugs. It becomes very easy then. If someone should come to you and say, hey, I assigned you these 3 requirements or these 2 bugs, are they fixed and have they been tested? By adding this missing components into our Team Foundation Server kind of traceability, we give the ability to do that. We do manage at a high level things like what is your test plan start and end dates? Are the tests manual or automated? What types of environments are you going to be running these tests in? And all the way down to a very low level where we do everything down to tell me what your individual test steps are. Tell me if you're going to automate this test. Tell me if there's test data, right? Am I going to parameterize this test case so I can run through it a number of times with different values? So that's all information that we can collect and record and manage and then use to help you automate the tests as well. So just to give you a quick preview of what it looks like before we get into the demo, it's a very simple interface. We've given you a dashboard type look and feel so that across the top you have a number of different activities. There's planning, testing, tracking, and organizing to help you get through the test planning in a very natural way. So what you're looking at here is a list of different test suites. So we can create different lists of tests just to manage our effort. You know, they can be managed by person, they can be managed by function, they can be managed by application. We don't make it something that's very rigid. It's set up in such a way so that you can use it to organize your test cases however you need to. After you've decided what your test plan is at a very high level, you can create a number of different types of test suites to organize those test cases. So if you think about a test plan is kind of the root folder on your C drive, test suites are the folders underneath that you use to organize things. So for instance, today you might have, you know, my documents, my OneNote files, my pictures. It's the same type of concept. We're trying to give you a way to just better structure your work. One of the neat things is that we have a few different ways to manage that. So they can be arbitrary folders, which means I can call them whatever I want. They can have any kind of test case in them that I want. It's up to me to determine which test cases go in there. Another type of test suite is a requirements-based test suite. This one is actually really interesting because not only does it say these tests are specifically linking back and validating this requirement, but if there are already test cases associated with the requirement, it will go ahead and pull that through for you. The last type of test suite is a dynamic test list. Now, I actually love the dynamic test list. This one is really great because it can give you ways to make sure things don't fall through the cracks. So, for instance, if I create a new test case and I want to enter it into a test suite, I have to make sure that I mentally make a note, okay, there's a new test case, let's make sure I go put it into that test suite. What a dynamic test list allows you to do is to set up predefined queries so that when you create new test cases, it can scan through the test case, it can see if it meets the criteria necessary to be dumped into that test suite and will automatically pull forward for you. So I could create a test suite that says, you know, hey, any test case that's, you know, has something to do with the shopping cart or is assigned to Angela or is related back to the specific piece of code, we want those to be dumped into a very specific test suite so that we don't forget about it. So that's certainly an interesting new thing that they've added. Now, one of the things that you'll hear me mention throughout probably the rest of the day's presentation is diagnostic data collection. So this is a really cool thing they added in 2010 that allows you to set up automatic data collection. So what this means is while I'm running a test, whether I'm a user acceptance tester or a QA person, maybe I'm a developer within Visual Studio, I can automatically have data collectors running in the background so that as I'm running through a manual test or as I'm running through a coded UI test, I can be monitoring the different systems that I'm touching and having it automatically pull and look for information like, you know, what were the steps that were performed? You know, what is some system information about the box that I was executing on? Things like operating system, service pack level, who was I logged in as, what was my screen resolution, a lot of data like that. We can grab IntelliTrace information. So honestly, I could do an entire session on IntelliTrace. IntelliTrace is something that we added in 2010. It's a pretty unique concept in that what we can do is collect stack trace information about both your local machine, even remote machines, so that should something go wrong and I find a bug or there's an issue that I can't quite reproduce on my own machine, I can simply pull that stack trace from another machine, and at any point in the future, whether it's now or 2 weeks from now, I can open that up in Visual Studio and walk through it and debug it in real time. Some other things you can grab are information like test impact data, so which tests are executing which code. That can be extremely useful because what can happen is after you run your tests, you're going to make some changes to your code, and you want to know based on those code changes which tests you would then need to rerun to regression test it. So that's something you can turn on as a data collector as well. Also things like event logs, right? What's being written to the system event log, the application event log. So imagine how powerful that can be as a person who is, maybe running a browser locally on their machine. That browser is hitting an IIS server off on another, in another computer, and maybe that's hitting a database server in a data center that's in another state. It might not even be locally accessible to you. So you can have data collected from all of those different machines, bundled up, and then pushed back into Team Foundation server, so I can access it anytime I need to. In terms of how that's being set up, we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about kind of low-level configuration, but I did want to give you kind of a visual of what that looks like. There are a lot of different moving parts going on. Again, a lot of this can happen on one local machine, but it can also be spread out across multiple physical machines as well. At the end of the day, Team Foundation server is always going to be, like I said before, that central hub. So Team Foundation server is going to have a test controller that's going to manage all of those data collection agents that are running on those machines. Again, those can be client machines, web servers, database servers. There's a number of different platforms that can be supported in terms of where we can collect that data. So let's take a closer look at manual testing, because like I said, there's some pretty cool stuff in terms of yeah, it's a manual test, you're still going to be walking through it by hand, but we've added a lot of capabilities to make that kind of a non-tedious effort, right? People think of manual testing and they start, griping like, oh, manual test, that takes forever. We have to, it takes a whole day just to run through a handful of manual tests. We have a lot of tools that can certainly help to speed that up as well. So on the manual testing side, again, we can create, manage, and plan your test efforts. We can support a number of different platforms. Again, because it's a manual test, honestly, you can manually test anything you want. You can manually test Windows Phone, mainframe, Java, .NET. Where you're going to see some limitations based on platform would be things like data collection. So where data collection is not going to be able to run on just any platform out there, but you can certainly still do manual testing and do some data collection, even if it's not Windows, even if it's not .NET. One of the neatest things that we have that I'm going to show you is called Fast Forward. Our Fast Forward capability allows you to record your manual test steps so that later on you can fast forward through them and essentially have the machine do what I call automation light for you. So it's not full-blown automation like you would get in Visual Studio, but it is a way to be able to seriously speed up the execution of manual tests. We're also going to look at rich data collection and bug generation, essentially having a one-click option to be able to collect a wealth of information about what was going on all your systems and pass that back to another developer or someone else on the team that needs to debug it. You also have the ability to very easily convert manual tests into automated UI tests in Visual Studio, and I'll be demoing that as well. So when you create a new manual test case, one of the things that I love about the Test Professional tool is that it's very familiar in terms of creation of a test case. In a lot of times when I was a developer, I would have to create manual test cases. They honestly looked a lot like this. It was just embedded in either an Excel spreadsheet or in a Word document that had a table in the bottom of it. So what we've done is turn that into something that we can collect using a much more robust tool. That data gets pushed down into Team Foundation Server 2010 automatically. So now as we're saving manual test cases, they're being pushed into that centralized repository. You'll notice that we are collecting quite a bit of information. Like all work item types in Team Foundation Server, this can be customized. So you can change the order of the fields, which ones are required. You can add custom data. There's a lot you can do to customize the experience here. But if you look down at the bottom of the screen, you'll see the meat of the manual test is essentially what are my actions that I have to take. On the right-hand side, we have what are those expected results. So for each action, there's going to be some kind of result. Do we go to the next page? Do we see some value change? Do we get some kind of affirmative response from the system? Things that I, as a manual tester, need to verify. We can also do things like link to requirements. We can link to pretty much anything that's in Team Foundation Server to create some really cool traceability. And you might even notice that there's an associated automation tab. Manual tests can be automated, and one of the things I'll be showing you in the demo is how you can convert a manual test into an automated test, which then allows a manual tester to run that test in an automated fashion, even through the manual test tools. Once you get to the point where you're ready to execute a test, there's a lot of different things that you can do in terms of data collection, targeting different environments. I'll be showing you quite a bit of that as well. This is essentially going to be your dashboard launching pad to be able to execute your test cases. So from here, you can see a list of the test suites that are in the current test plan. I can see all of the different test cases and the last run result, whether that was passed or failed. Something else that's interesting is you might notice that we have things like who is the tester that's executing the test, what is the configuration they're targeting in terms of operating system or browser. You can actually customize that to be whatever configuration variables that you need to show, in addition to having things like priority, automation status. We'll be going through a demo of this as well. Now, when you get to the part where you're actually executing the manual test, again, we have some really interesting features here. So while you're doing your manual testing, again, you might notice on the left-hand side, we have sort of a widget that runs on the screen side by side with your application, so that while you're running your manual test, it will literally kind of walk you through what are all the individual steps that I need to execute. You know, I need to log into a website, I need to click a button, I need to enter some data. You might notice in the middle of that widget on the left-hand side that there's actually some data there. So we have parameters that we need to be able to fill in so that every time we run this test, we're going to have different data, right? I may want to register as 5 or 6 different people. I'm going to have valid data, invalid data. I want to verify that no matter what I'm entering, that I'm always getting the proper results back. Now, one of the other things you might be noticing is that those are actually hyperlinks. Now, there's a couple of cool things that come from that. Once we've data bound something to the form, which easily happens, the first time you go through, you enter a value, it data binds for you. The next time I run through the test, if I want to fast forward through the test, it will automatically fill that data in for me. If I get to a point where I'm going to pull that into Visual Studio to automate it, it's going to automatically add that data source as well, and I'll be showing you what that looks like too. So as you're going through your individual manual test case steps, notice we have kind of the green checkbox over here that can help you indicate pass-fail. You can take screenshots, you can add notes. At any point you can stop, you can rewind and start over. There's a lot of really great tools to help you collect the data that you need. Now, once we move into Visual Studio, there's quite a bit from an automation perspective that we can do as well. So now moving into Visual Studio, we have automated UI testing. So again, this is coded UI. That's the name for the new feature. This is enabling you to create functional user interface test automation. They can come from existing manual test scripts. They can also come from scratch. So I could just open up an application, turn on the recorder, and have it start keeping track of all of my steps to build an automated UI test for me. It'll support web UI, so IE and Firefox. It'll support WinForms. It'll support WPF. And there's a feature pack that came out just a couple of months ago that adds support for Silverlight 4 as well. One of the things I'll be demoing today is what this looks like. So it's just a new test case type. So if you're already familiar with Visual Studio test cases, there's just a new test case or a test type called coded UI tests. When I launch that test wizard, it's going to ask me, how do I want to generate the code? Do I want to generate it myself, or do I want to import a manual test case and have it generate that for me? That's actually one of the cooler ways to do it as a developer. You know, I'm inherently lazy. I don't want to write that code myself, so I love the ability to reuse someone else's work. So I'll be showing you what that looks like too. From an automation platform support, so what I mean here is when we're talking about coded UI testing, when we're talking about that fast forward feature for manual testing, again, like I mentioned, we don't necessarily support every platform under the sun out of the box. We do our best to support everything that's current, that's essentially using the Microsoft automation standards. So you'll notice that everything that's in green are things that we fully support. Anything that's in yellow is partial support. In a lot of cases, customers just kind of give it a try, and a lot of times it'll work just great. With blue, same thing. It's best efforts right now. We have some workarounds. And then there's only a few things down at the bottom, some of the older technologies, some of the things that are not our own technologies where currently we don't have support, but there are some partners that are already working on things to add automation support for those platforms as well. And just to mention, don't feel like you have to write all this stuff down furiously. I know we will be sharing out the slides, so you'll definitely get a copy of this as well. Now, I'm not going to walk through all the resources, but I just wanted to note, as you go through the slides, after some of the major sections, I do make sure to include resources for things like training, walkthrough, hands-on labs, just to make sure you can get some additional information. So another type of automated test case that we support in Visual Studio is web performance testing. So again, web performance testing is all about testing the performance of the web server. So we're actually monitoring IIS, we're pulling back statistics on how quickly pages are being sent back, what are our response times, are we throwing any errors. This gives you a nice way to be able to, author, debug, and even extend your web performance tests. It's going to automatically handle a lot of things that you have to worry about when you're doing web performance testing, things like correlating your variables like view state, redirects, dependent requests, doing any kind of authentication, so the support for that is built in as well as being able to do security through HTTPS and SSL. What that looks like, pretty simple recorder. You open up essentially a browser. Now, it does open IE by default, but that does not mean that you can't run these tests in just about any browser. Again, we're not really testing the user interface. What we're testing is essentially our interaction with the server. So that HTTP traffic going back and forth is what we're actually recording and playing back. So when you go to play these tests back, you can simply tell it, okay, I want to emulate a Chrome browser or Firefox or Opera or IE, and it will simply replace the header information, send the information to IIS, and then collect the statistics, play back essentially what it is that you were recording. So it's a very simple thing to do to be able to swap out any browser type for this. Once you've created those test types, we also have load testing. So one of the nice things about load testing is really it's just a harness that's going to allow you to take any of your automated test types, so unit tests, web service tests, be able to create a harness to scale out the testing, right? So instead of just having one user try to register or place something in a shopping cart or make a request to a web service, let's see how it reacts when we have 5 users, 500 users, 5,000 users. So it gives you the ability to truly scale that test out and see how your servers can react. It will support a number of different test types. So you can do smoke testing, stress testing, capacity planning. We even have a new feature pack that was released, I think, in the beginning of March that will allow you to use virtual user packs for free. A virtual user pack allows you to scale above and beyond the hard limit in Visual Studio. So Visual Studio caps you at 250 concurrent virtual users when you're doing a load test, but with each virtual user pack, you can add 1,000 users to that. And again, that's unlimited at no cost, depending on what you own, right? So if you have Visual Studio Ultimate and MSDN, you're going to be able to emulate as many users as you want, and it's not going to cost you anything except for getting, of course, the hardware to support that. One of the nice things about our load testing tool is that they have made some enhancements there as well. So they've added some really great reporting so that I can pull back not only a large number of metrics, but I can essentially partition those metrics into 2 different sections. So in this case, I have 4 different panels where I'm looking at, controller and agent metrics, page response time, looking at the system variables. Out of the box, we give you, I want to say it's at least a few dozen different sets of performance metrics that you can pull back. That's also a customizable and extensible list, so you can also write your own custom metrics as well. So again, more resources. Some other things I want to talk about a little bit before I go into the demo are dev and test lab management. So this is actually a topic that's been coming up more and more when I talk to customers, because folks, everyone wants to do more with less. No one wants to have to, necessarily hire a whole team full of people or get an entire, huge room full of physical machines just to be able to have different dev and test environments to be able to test in. So for instance, you may need to run your application under, XP and Vista and Windows 7 and possibly even Server. You might have to support IE7, IE8, and now IE9 is coming out. So you would have to have a lot of different machines set up so that you could deploy code to them, test them in the different environments to make sure that they still worked regardless of where you were putting that code. The idea here is that gets very cumbersome to manage. Generally, we find that either developers are kind of left to their own devices to try to manage this. In some cases, they don't have the environment, so they're having to do all their testing locally. Or in some cases, they might actually have some IT folks who are dedicated, whether they're infrastructure people or networking people, who, you have to pick up a phone, say, okay, I need a machine with this operating system and this browser, and then I need you to give me access to it so I can put code out on it and test it. And it becomes a very time-consuming process, right? It might take a couple of hours or even a couple of days just to get an environment to test in. And at that point, you're already moving on to probably the next version. You're fixing some other bugs. So it's kind of an endless cycle of being a little bit behind the 8 ball there. So what this is going to allow you to do is to take advantage of some of our capabilities with System Center and virtualization through things like Hyper-V to allow you to manage those environments in a much more seamless way. So for instance, again, lab management is a plugin to Team Foundation Server, which means it's also going to have access to source control and to build scripts and to test cases. This means that now you can orchestrate scenarios such that Team Foundation Server can request an environment for you. It can deploy that environment, connect to the environment. You could potentially add source code, throw that out on the environment, as well as run some automated tests against it. So in terms of what's happening behind the scenes, it's not really magic. Sometimes it seems that way with some of the technology that we have. This is actually using System Center Virtual Machine Manager under the covers to quickly deploy and tear down your test environments. So imagine being able to predefine different types of machines that you want to have access to. So for instance, I'm going to need a database server with SQL Server 2008. I'm going to need a server with IIS on it. I'm going to need another machine that's going to act as my client because I don't want to run things locally on my dev box. I want to have a separate client where there's no IDE, there's no source code, there's no kind of pollution of the environment. But I need to have, 3 different operating systems. I need to be able to have a number of different browsers. So you can predefine all of the different types of systems that you need to have access to. So individual machines, right? Within System Center, those can be templates, they can be libraries. There's a few different ways to predefine that. Where it really starts to come together is now when it comes time for me to request an environment, whether I'm a tester or a DBA or a developer, I can use one of the interfaces. So in this case, it would be the test professional interface actually has a component to manage the lab. I could go in and actually define my environment. So now I can say my environment, it might be 1 machine. It might be 5 machines. It could be 10 machines, right? An environment can be a very complex thing. What we do is put essentially a front end on it that essentially hides some of that System Center detail from you. So I don't need to know anything about System Center or Hyper-V really to be able to take some predefined systems, put them together into an environment, and then make them accessible to the tools I'm using. It will also enable some really cool end-to-end automation so that Team Foundation Server, like I said before, can provision the environment, build my code, deploy my code to that newly provisioned environment, and even run tests on it for me. So that's a really powerful scenario that you can automate. In terms of what that looks like from a workflow perspective, a lot of this is being enabled by some of our new team build capabilities. So one of the other things that we changed in Team Foundation Server 2010 was we added Windows Workflow Foundation as an underlying technology that's allowing Team Build to set up these very complex workflows. So while Team Build can do something simple like, compile my local version of my code and create an executable, it can also enable a much more rich scenario. So something like get my source code, right? Get the latest version from Team Foundation Server, compile that for me. I now have lab management, so I can grab a virtual environment that I have access to through that lab management. I can say, let's take a snapshot of that environment, because at some point we're going to have kind of that crisp, clean environment with just an operating system and a browser. We haven't deployed any code to it, so let's take a snapshot of that so that Team Foundation Server can say, once we've done that once, let's just go ahead and keep restoring that clean image, and then take that compiled code and deploy it out to those virtual environments. We can then create another snapshot, right? This is where the beauty of virtualization comes in. I can have another post-deployment snapshot, so that now if I start running my tests and I need to rewind back in time to that fresh environment plus deployed code, I have that too. So it kind of reminds me of, you know, watching a DVD and being able to go back and forth from chapters. It's the same type of concept, but we're doing that with an environment that we're now deploying code out to. We can now turn on the test controller feature of Team Foundation Server, point it at that virtual environment, and have it execute those automated tests for me. So this is a very robust team build workflow that's actually supported right out of the box with TFS 2010. After those tests have been run, you can then have those test results automatically sent back to Team Foundation Server. At that point, there's a number of things that you can have happen. So you can have an email sent out to the QA staff that says, hey, we deployed the code, we ran the tests all passed, here's the environment. Now you can start doing your manual testing. You know, you could also have it kick off some automated, essentially, feature that would push it from one environment to another. So, you know, maybe we pushed it out to our dev environment, we've run some tests on it, let's now promote that to QA or to a staging environment and send out some notifications. So there's some really powerful automation from that standpoint as well. Now, one thing that almost always comes up when I'm in a large presentation is, hey, you know, we use VMware. So you keep talking about all this great lab and virtualization, but it seems to be System Center and Hyper-V. But a lot of folks have already made a big investment in VMware. We understand that. We're not saying you're certainly not going to be able to take advantage of it. You can. There's a few features that we can't enable, we can't support out of the box, just because there's not a great way for us through the tooling that we have to automate some of those features with VMware. But that doesn't mean you're completely dead in the water. So here I've created a nice little table that explains if you're in a virtual environment using Hyper-V versus being in a physical environment, which means I'm not using any virtualization. I literally have 6, 7, 10 different machines that someone is physically going in there and putting in a disk and installing stuff or even remoting in there, but there's some kind of manual intervention that needs to happen. Hyper-V can also be supported. It's very similar to a physical environment in terms of how we interact with it. Now, the cool thing here is that, you know, one of the most powerful things that everybody wants is that automated build, deploy, test workflow. The not supported but possible with customization yellow dots that you see for physical and virtual, those have actually already been solved. I actually need to flip those to green. They're actually something where you would use the out-of-the-box TFS component. You would tweak essentially the build workflow that we give you out of the box to have it target physical or virtual environments using VMware. So that's something that we've actually documented. We have a great blog post that can walk you through that. So in terms of automation and lab resources, I've included just a few more on how to set up test automation, how to install and configure those agents. Again, the agents are going to run on all of the different systems that you want TFS to be able to manage for you for both build deployments as well as doing that data collection that I talked about. Down at the bottom, notice I have some lab management resources. Lab Management Basics will walk you through pretty much everything you need to get a high-level understanding of what lab management is. The config and administration has some great tips and tricks. I believe that's also where you'll find the information on how to configure it to work with VMware and physical environments. And the question I probably get asked the most when it comes to lab management is how do I start planning for this, right? I know I have, say, 20 or 30 different environments, but if I'm using virtualization, that's not necessarily one for one, right? I could run many virtual slices on each physical server, but I don't really know how much RAM I need, the hard drive space that's going to be necessary. The planning considerations will actually walk you through some of the things to think about, and it even has an Excel workbook with a calculator built in so that you can answer questions like, how many environments do we have? How many testers do I have? How many people are going to be requesting environments at the same time? And it will essentially give you some really good recommendations on what you would need from both a hardware and a software perspective to support that. So another thing that gets enabled through a lot of our functionality in TFS 2010 is very rich bug creation. So, you know, the whole point of this presentation is curing your testing blues. And I find that there's kind of two halves to that. Half of the problem, you know, is someone who's been a developer and a tester and talks to, you know, I have hundreds of customers that each have, you know, potentially hundreds of developers. I've probably talked to a few thousand people over the last few years about this. And we hear, you know, on the one side, there's, you know, the tooling isn't always built in the way we need it to be. So we've added some tools into Visual Studio. We've created Test Pro to give you that. The other half of what's really kind of bumming people out about the whole testing relationship is that there's not always good bugs to work off of. You know, I as a developer, I can count on many hands the number of times I've said, I can't reproduce this problem, so it's not going to be real easy for me to fix it. You know, there have been bugs where I've had to bounce them back and say, I'm sorry, you know, I've spent 2 days on it, I can't reproduce it, you know, I can't go into production and debug it easily, so, you know, we're just going to have to leave this one. So what we've tried to do is make sure to give you every tool necessary, every way possible of being able to collect information so that you can reproduce the error, whether it's reproducing it natively on your own machine or being able to essentially walk through everything on that other machine to allow you to see the bug, to recreate the bug, and to be able to truly figure out what's causing the problem. So there's a few things that do that. A lot of it is going to come down to very robust data collection as tests are running. So again, I mentioned back on that previous slide that we have a number of different data collectors. You can run these data collectors on the different systems that you're executing your tests on, whether that's a local system or a remote system. We can grab things like stack trace information, what are the actual actions that the person took. I'm particularly fond of the video feature so that it's, if you can imagine someone standing over your shoulder with a video camera or a webcam so that they can record, you know, what was happening on the screen, what did they click, were there any pop-ups in their icon tray, was there something else that maybe they're not necessarily telling me that happened because they didn't think it was relevant. So these are things you can record. So one of the cool things, again, is that these can run in the background as a test is running. So as a manual tester, I can go in, start my manual test, and I don't have to know or care that there's data collection going on. It doesn't affect me, you know, personally. I can still run through my test. I don't see, it's not going to affect me. But when I'm done, when I've run through that test and I found a bug, it's going to automatically reach back out to all those different systems that have data collection happening and pull that information into the bug for me. So even when I find a bug, there's not a lot of extra work that I have to do to make sure I'm giving as much information to my developer as possible. So for instance, on this screen, you can see that I've created a new bug. I'll show you this in a demo. It's just a quick little button that you click within the interface. When I say new bug, it's going to automatically pull in the test information, the steps that were executed. If I tell it I wanted to collect video, it's going to attach that. If I've taken any screenshots, it's going to include the screenshots as well. And if I'm using lab management, now this is one of the really interesting features. If I'm using lab management and I'm using VMware, which means I have the maximum capability to be able to do snapshotting and automation, I can even take a snapshot of the environment and attach that to the bug as well. So that's incredibly powerful. So not only can I hand the developer a bug that says, you know, I got an error message, here was the text, here's a screenshot, here's an action log and a video, I can say, and by the way, here's actually a snapshot into the environment I was running the test in, and that snapshot is a point-in-time snapshot, which means, you know, chances are I'm going to submit this bug, and that developer might not get to that bug until the next day. It might be the next week before the developer actually gets to looking at that bug that I submit. But that's okay, because they have a snapshot, which means that environment that I was testing in, I've probably kept going. I've started doing other things to that environment. I've dirtied the data. I've added rows. I've deleted rows. I've done all kinds of things that could change the state of the environment that I found the bug in. But as a developer, I can then essentially choose to go back and bounce back into that environment and have it rewind back to the point in time where they found the bug. So I can undo all of that additional change that that tester made. That's the beauty of snapshots. The tester could have taken a snapshot later, and then they can fast forward it back to where they left off. So we can share an environment and literally bounce back and forth between past, present, and future states of that environment, so we can see how the system changes as we work with it over time. One of the other more powerful data collection tools that we have is, so we have steps taken with video. So again, this isn't really anything surprising, right? When I click on one of those video links, it's going to open up Windows Media Player, it's going to start playing the file, and I can see what was happening. It's going to grab system information, so again, who was logged in, computer name, OS version. You can see that it's giving you a lot of really great information about what was happening on the system. Even things like, here's my total physical memory, but here's how much was actually available, right? Because maybe we ran out of memory, the CPU spiked, so we can give you those stats as well. And again, that can happen on as many systems as I'm collecting data on. So I might have 6 or 7 sets of system information based on which systems I decided to monitor. Action log. So I'll spend a little bit of time showing you the action log. You know, at first blush, not very exciting. It's a notepad file. You know, started testing, clicked on some stuff, opened a window. This tool is very powerful in what it can allow you to do. So this is the tool that I'm essentially going to be using to do my fast forward feature later. It's also a big part of what we use to do the automated UI testing that we can generate. Potentially one of the coolest things from a developer's perspective, this is where we get probably the most oohs and ahs, is the IntelliTrace feature. So IntelliTrace is one more set of information that we can automatically collect during test running. So imagine a manual tester running a manual test where they have a browser on their machine, there's an IIS server somewhere, right? It might be their machine, but it might be in a data center. There's a database involved sitting somewhere, and they run into a bug and pass that off to you. Maybe it was a SQL error, maybe it was some kind of exception that got cannibalized somewhere up the call stack, and now you have no idea where that came from. You just got some message that popped up on their user interface that might not really indicate in any way where that error came from. The idea with IntelliTrace is that's okay, because I can actually grab the stack trace off the machine that was running that code that failed, and I can open it up in Visual Studio. So I don't have to go into source code and pull down some old version of the code. I don't have to do that. They're handing me a stack trace that I can hit F11, I can go forwards and backwards, I can see the autos window, the locals window. I have full debugging capabilities on code that may have never existed on my machine at any point in time. So this is a really powerful feature that they added in 2010. One last thing to look at before we jump into the demo is some of the reporting capabilities, because honestly, the reporting is where we get a lot of really great information back. So we've talked about testing, we've talked about writing code and debugging and creating bugs and creating build scripts. There's a lot of data that gets generated as part of that. So we're constantly grabbing data about how much code is being written, how many bugs are being fixed, how long did it take a test run, did it pass or did it fail? That's all very important information. Maybe as a developer or an individual tester, you may not care about kind of the minutia of the data, but at the end of the day, at the end of the week, someone's going to come around and ask, hey, how close are we to being done? How many bugs did we fix this week? How many bugs did we find in the last build? And that's data that would be really awesome if you had it at your fingertips. So the idea is, all of this information that we're collecting as part of Team Foundation Server, we can then push back out in the form of different reports. So again, because Team Foundation Server is based on SQL Server, we're using SQL Server reporting services. So you get a lot of really robust reporting capabilities just from the fact that we're sitting in a SQL Server database. We're going to be automatically collecting a SQL Server data warehouse off of that Team Foundation Server data. We will also be creating a number of different reports, canned reports, that you can use to pull back business intelligence on all of that great data that you've been collecting. So here's an example of one of the SQL Server reporting services reports that we have. So for instance, here we're looking at a much more useful version of that traceability matrix that I'm sure somebody on this call has had to maintain. I know I had to maintain at least a few of them in my day. So if you imagine that big honkin' Excel spreadsheet where you have requirements, and then you have source code, and then you have test cases, test results, and bugs, and someone's having to keep a matrix so that someone can come up to me and say, hey, requirement 2.1.5.6, have we tested it and how many bugs did we find? And you could go down the line, and assuming that everybody kept that spreadsheet up to date, I would be able to tell you how many bugs were created, when it was created, who did it, but that was a nightmare to maintain. And unless somebody made that almost a full-time job to maintain it, it was never accurate. It was always at least a couple of days behind, things got dropped or missed. The idea is we can store that information in that SQL Server database within Team Foundation Server. We can manage the relationships. We can manage changes to the relationships. We have full auditing capabilities on any changes that are made. And we can pull up really great reports like this. So if somebody comes to me and says, hey, there's that one requirement about customer needs to find reviews for a restaurant, tell me how well that's going. I can say, hey, well, you know, we're 100% done on our work. We don't have any hours left on the actual development of it. We've got 2 test cases right now, 1 passed, 1 failed. We've got 3 bugs issued against it, so not so good. But maybe if they're asking about customer rates review, we can say, hey, we're done. You know, we've got 3 tests. About half of them are passing so far. We haven't found any bugs. You know, you might have some where you can say, hey, that requirement is done. It's been tested. Everything's passing, and there's no current bugs in the system. So it gives you a really great way to do analysis on that data. And this is a report that we just give you for free out of the box with the TFS. So all you have to do is put the data into TFS. We'll give you the reports to pull data back out. Now, there's about 30 or 40 different reports. I really just picked one for today because I figured no one wanted to sit here and look at, 20 minutes worth of reports. But we do have full-blown documentation on all the different report types out on the MSDN website if you want to go through some of the other ones. Now, you might be thinking as well, yeah, that's great, but I don't really know SQL Server reporting services. So what if I want to do some ad hoc reporting? I don't want to have to buy a 20-pound book on how to write SQL Server reporting services or make a request to my IT department to have someone else write it. We also have a plugin to Excel that allows you to do reporting against Team Foundation Server using Excel services. We do give you a number of canned reports for this as well. So you can click a button and have it generate some tests out of some reports out of Team Foundation Server. And in all cases, whether it's SQL Server reporting services or Excel, you can write your own reports as well as customize the ones we give you. Now, the way you get to those reports, there's a number of different ways to do it. So much like our work items in TFS, so bugs and tasks and requirements, you can get to those work items through Office tools, through Visual Studio, through SharePoint. Reporting, you can get at through Visual Studio, you can get to through the website, you can also get to it through SharePoint. Now, we don't find that all developers and testers use SharePoint, but in a lot of cases, your managers are using SharePoint. Their managers are using SharePoint. This is just a really great way to have one more interface that can sit on top of Team Foundation Server. So while as a developer, you might be spending your day fixing bugs and implementing requirements and change requests, somebody's going to want to know, how does everything look at a very high level, right? And it's not really very productive for them to go around and ask each individual developer what's going. It'd be ideal for them to just be able to go to a nice dashboard where they can get some reports back that tell them how are things going. You know, what are the hottest 3 bugs that we're working on this week? How many bugs did we close? You know, how quickly are we testing our application? So everything that I've been talking to so far, so builds, bugs, reports, those things can all be exposed through a SharePoint site. Now, one of the beautiful things here is Team Foundation Server can generate that SharePoint site for you, and it can automatically update it for you. So say, for instance, you've rolled out a new build, you found some new change requests, you have some new reporting data. Nobody's responsible for going to SharePoint and updating that. TFS will do that for you. So it's a very low maintenance way to have another kind of landing pad for the people on the team to be able to collaborate and share information. So just a couple of quick points before I jump into the demo, and I probably will come back out to my slides really quick just to talk about MSDN a little bit. But you might have heard me mention feature packs. We do have a number of things that were added. So for instance, Visual Studio 2010 released last April, but there were a lot of features that were almost done when we hit code freeze. That happens to everybody, right? It happens to us here at Microsoft too. The idea here is after we released it, there were some things that we wanted to add, but we didn't want you to have to wait for the next version of Visual Studio to get them. So we started releasing something called feature packs. Some feature packs are going to be available to you even if you don't have MSDN. So for instance, there's a Visual Studio productivity feature pack. I think Zain Nabulsi talked about it in his last meeting where he was doing tips and tricks. That is a fantastic feature pack to download. It's got a lot of great searchability, discoverability things that you can do with your solution files. But there's some that are specific to MSDN subscribers only. So these are people who actually have MSDN subscriptions, either through your own personal purchase or through your company. So for instance, one of the feature packs that we have is specifically around testing. So some of the things I'm talking about today, some additional features get turned on by having the feature pack. So for instance, if you're running Visual Studio 2010 and you're looking to do coded UI testing and you're like, hey, I don't see Silverlight support, you probably don't have the feature pack installed. So go out there, download the feature pack, install it on top of Visual Studio, and you'll notice that that adds support for in-browser Silverlight for testing if you have either Visual Studio Premium or Ultimate. It's also going to add support for being able to do automation through Firefox in addition to Internet Explorer. It's also going to give you a graphical editor for coded UI tests. So there's some things that definitely get added by having the feature packs. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over and share out my image that currently has Visual Studio running on it. So hopefully everybody can see the entire screen. Just a reminder, depending on your screen resolution, you may need to hit F5 to kind of full screen that so that you won't have to do any scrolling. So what you're looking at here is Microsoft Test Professional. So this is brand new in 2010. A lot of people have not seen that yet. I often find that sometimes people who actually own Test Professional, maybe through your work or through kind of your own purchase, you have Visual Studio Ultimate already. A lot of folks don't realize this is actually a separate download. So you have to go to MSDN, download Microsoft Test Professional, and this does need to sit on top of a TFS 2010 instance. So it doesn't have to be on the same physical machine, but you do have to have TFS 2010 set up somewhere for this testing tool to work. It's using TFS 2010 as its back-end repository and as its automation platform. So here you're looking at the testing center. Just to show you really quick, I talked a little bit about how we have some lab management capabilities. That's in the lab center, so I'll be going to that just a little bit later. We're going to stay in the testing center for a bit. This is where I do my manual test planning. So here's where I can manage my high-level test plan. In this case, I have chosen to essentially map my test planning efforts to my development efforts. So I'm doing iterative development. I have iteration 1, iteration 2 from a developer's perspective. I have the same thing from a tester's perspective. You certainly don't have to do it that way, but that's one way that you could very easily kind of map your testing efforts to your development efforts. Underneath my test plan, I have a number of different test suites. You'll see that I actually have 4 of them. I actually have some different types of test suites going on too. I have requirements-based test suite, so if you'll notice that little red check marks on the folder, that means that I've imported a requirement and then I've associated some test cases with the requirement. So in this case, you know, you can see 7, 8, and 9. Those are all specific requirements that I'm having to validate. At the bottom, you'll see something called end-to-end tests. That's actually just my own custom test suite. So I just said create a new test folder. I'm going to call it end-to-end tests. That could be anything I want. That could be Brian's tests, Angela's tests. It could be front-end tests, shopping cart tests. It's just, again, a way to create folders to organize your test cases. On the right-hand side, I have the actual test cases themselves. So you'll notice that in each test suite, I can have different test cases. You can certainly have test cases be in more than one test suite. You may have test cases that validate multiple things, or for whatever reason, they just fall into different categories. Nothing wrong with that. If you go over here onto the right-hand side, you'll notice that a lot of little buttons pop up in our toolbar, things like configurations. So with configurations, we're saying, what are the different configurations of lab environments that I want to be able to run in? So this is really just information for the tester. At this point, we're not actually doing any provisioning of environments. We're just telling the tester, hey, when you go to run this test, these are the different type environments you need to go out and find so that you can make sure that you run it, whether it's local or remote or off in some lab somewhere. You also have the ability to assign test cases. So over here on the right-hand side, if you choose an individual test, you're doing that for each individual test case. Again, I'm a developer. I'm inherently pretty lazy. So I can say pull up all the test cases in a test suite and let me assign them to individual people to execute. Now, one of the interesting things you might notice is you're like, hey, there were really only 2 test cases, but when you open that up, I see 4. What's going on there? The reason is because each test case is being executed in different environments. So you're going to need to actually execute that test, each test case twice. One in Windows 7 and IE8 and one in Windows Server 2008 and IE8. The reason for that is because we store the results of the test for each configuration, because it could certainly pass in one environment and fail in another. So you can go ahead and save. Now I can see that there's multiple testers who are going to be responsible for that test case. All of those test cases are going to be run by Abu. Once we're done with our planning activity, we can move over into our testing activity. So now we're actually saying, okay, now we're done planning. Now we want to actually start executing those test cases. So it's going to change the look of the dashboard just a little bit. It's going to take any test suites that you saw in the plan tab that are ready to run. So you'll notice that not all 4 of them showed up. Anything that's empty or in a in-process state is not going to show up because, you know, they're not ready for you to execute. I can click on a test suite. It's going to show you which test cases are in the test suite. In addition to that, it will also give you the last test run results, so whether it failed or passed most recently. From here, I can open up a test case if you want to see what that looks like. You're going to see a screen very similar to the one I showed you when we were kind of walking through the slides up front. Again, if you've ever done any kind of manual testing, even if it was through Excel or Word, this is going to look fairly familiar. You're going to see a lot of the same information that you've been having to record anyway. Again, the nice idea is this is just going into the Team Foundation server database. It's easily shared with other people on your team. Any changes that you make are going to be automatically tracked and auditable, so you can see, you know, who changed it, if it got added, when it got added. You can even see things like when it was associated with a requirement or when we associated it with a bug. So down on the left-hand side, you can see all of our actions. You can copy and paste. One of the questions we get a lot is, hey, we've already got test cases in Excel. How the heck do we get those test cases into Team Foundation Server? Because I don't want to have to retype all of those. Well, you don't have to. We actually have a couple of ways you can do that. So one tool is there's actually an import tool out there. It's out on Codeplex, but it's also in the Visual Studio Gallery. I always suggest going to the Visual Studio Gallery first because those are fully supported by product support. So we have a test case import tool. I think it's called TC Import. That allows you to take Excel spreadsheets and pull them into Team Foundation Server so that you can then open them as test cases the way I just opened this one. The other thing that's nice is this down here is essentially Excel functionality. So I can copy and paste a number of rows from Excel straight into this test tool. So if I have a 30-line Excel spreadsheet, copy those 30 lines, paste it right here into this test. Over on the right-hand side, notice we have expected results. So I can say for each individual step, I may have something that I have to validate to make sure that the test is working. Notice I also have some parameter values down at the bottom. Over here, I have new quantity. I have that little @ symbol right here in front of it. That @ symbol is what implies that this is a variable. So now it's going to give me a table at the bottom so that I can insert different values. So in this case, to fully execute this test, I'd have to run the test 3 different times with those 3 different values. We also have a summary, just like for any work item type. So this is going to show any person who's ever changed or edited or linked that item to something else. You'll notice there's been some edits made where people have gone in and changed values. It was linked to a requirement. It was linked to a bug. So you can see you can have full traceability of everything that's ever happened. Here we can go to what are the user stories and requirements that are being validated by this test. All links, right? So we've already run this test and actually filed a bug off of it. We also have a requirement that we link to. If you want to do external attachments, attach screenshots or other documents. And I'll actually show you this when we go into Visual Studio. When you get to a point where you take a manual test and automate it, one of the things that you can do is take that automation, associate it back to the manual test, so that now when a person opens that test case, they can either choose to run it manually or they can run it in an automated fashion as well. So let's go ahead and close out of that right now. Okay, now what I want you to do is I want to show you what this looks like to actually run a test. So we're going to go ahead and run the entering invalid data scenario. So we're going to click run. Now you can either click the default run or you can say run with options. We're actually going to drill into some of these options shortly after we run the test. So I can tell it what build am I running this against, so which version of the code should I be executing against. Now this becomes important because if I have automated tests, my automated tests most likely are associated with very specific builds of the code because as the application changes, I might need to have different automated tests running. So this is one of the things that we get from the build. We can also tell it what is our build configuration that we're running against. Test settings. So this is where you're specifying what data you want to automatically collect in the background while the test is running. So currently we have something called lightweight diagnostics chosen. That name is literally a name that I chose. That could be Angela's favorite data collection settings. That could be data collection setting A. It's just a profile name that saves the settings, and I'll show you how we do that in just a little bit. But notice I have a few different setups because in some cases I may want to collect as much information as possible. In other cases, I may just want to grab a few things, or I may want to have no data being collected. That's also an option. Now, I don't have lab management deployed on this particular image that I'm using today, but if I did, you could potentially have multiple environments here that you could target as well. So for right now, all my testing is happening just within this particular image on my laptop. So I'm going to go ahead and say run. What that's going to do is it's going to minimize the test professional window. I'm going to go ahead and minimize Visual Studio since I don't need that yet. And it's going to open up that manual test runner tool that I talked about before. So here you can see that I have essentially the test steps that I was just walking through before being shown to me in a nice little sidebar widget. So I'm going to go ahead and say start test. Right down here you can see a checkbox that says override existing action recording. Again, keep in mind one of the data collectors that you have the ability to collect is an action recording. That action recording, that's that notepad file that I showed you that said it keeps track of everything you do. I've already done that. So once you do it once, unless the test case changes or something within the application changes that forces this test case to need to be altered a little bit, just keep reusing that same action recording, and I'll show you why. So we're going to start the test. That little initializing window means I'm turning on data collectors, right? I have some data collection automatically running in the background now. So now I'm going to go through and show you kind of running through it manually, and then I'll go through it a second time and show you the fast forward functionality. So, nothing too mind-blowing here. Open up the app. go ahead and say, yes, that passed. Click model airplanes. I've done this a few times now, so I'm getting a little faster. Go through there, click add to cart. Oh, and of course, my image decides to blow up on me. Hold on just 1 second. Let me just restart it real quick. It is the rule of demos. I literally went through this twice this morning to make sure that all my drivers were working properly. There's an issue with my video driver that occasionally causes my images to die on me. And it worked fine the first 2 times this morning, and of course now it fails during the actual demo. Give me just 1 moment. So that'll probably just take like 2 minutes to probably get fired up, and then I'll need to log into it. So while I'm waiting for that to reload, I'm just going to go through a couple of other things so we don't have to suffer through dead air. From a testing perspective, one of the other things that comes up quite often is that people a lot of times will already have testing tools that they're using, either tools that currently plug into Visual Studio, tools that are meant for other platforms, things that they're already taking advantage of. So in a lot of cases, those tools can work side by side with Visual Studio. In some cases, they can actually plug into Visual Studio. We've also seen some extensibility that people are adding where we can have full integration between those tools and Team Foundation Server. And it does vary kind of widely based on the vendor as well as your usage of it. So I included this page just to show you some of the ones that are available. We have something called the TFS integration platform that you can use to integrate data between other systems. So that's certainly something where if you have questions, you can either email them to me or put them in the Q&A panel, because there are certainly a lot of different scenarios that can be enabled for that as well. There's some other great resources that I wanted to make sure people were aware of, because inevitably after a demo like this, people are like, hey, I really want to get my hands on those tools, but, maybe your company doesn't own the tools, or it's just not something that you can necessarily spend time building a system to support. So there are trials and pre-built virtual machines that you can download. And as a matter of fact, the image that I'm using is just a virtual machine image that I downloaded from a person's blog. He actually works for Microsoft. His name is Brian Keller. You might know who he is because he's traveled internationally to do a lot of tech ed events. But he creates these really awesome VMs that have Team Foundation Server, Visual Studio, all of that is already installed and configured, so that all you have to do is download the VM, launch it, and then just start running with it. So you can run some test cases, you can see what the manual tests look like, and everything is there and ready to go. There are images for Hyper-V, there are images for Windows Virtual PC, and there are even images for kind of older versions of Windows Virtual PC 2007 as well. So whether you're on XP, Vista, Windows 7, or Windows Server, you will be able to take advantage of those as well. There's also a ton of training out there. There's a lot of hands-on labs. There's walkthroughs. There's a set of videos called How Do I videos. So it's things like, how do I create a load test? How do I walk through a manual test? How do I, use lab management to do things? So there's some really great resources already ready for you to use. All right, so I'm just logging into my image. So it'll be just a second. Okay, one other thing I'll just flash up really quickly before we move back into our demo. This looks way better on my screen than I think it looks in your window, so I'll make sure I clean it up a little just in case some of it is on my end. But this is just a breakdown of what we have, because I showed that first slide where I walked through about 30 different features. It's not always necessarily clear which products those features are actually contained in. So some people might have Visual Studio Pro, some people have Premium, some people have Ultimate, some people have Test Professional, and it gets a little confusing sometimes as to where those functions actually exist. So this is just kind of a nice little cheat sheet that can tell you which things are in the professional tools, so the manual test case management, the lab management, creating rich actionable bugs, test agents, all of those things are managed in Test Pro. If you have Visual Studio Ultimate, that actually includes rights to Test Pro. It's a separate tool, but you do have rights to use it. Ultimate is where you're going to find web testing and load testing. Visual Studio Premium is where you're going to find UI test automation, profiling, code coverage, code metrics. There's a lot more features than what's on the screen, but I was trying to stay kind of centric to what was relevant for testing. Okay, really quickly, I'm going to flip back over to my image. It's just starting to fire up the test manager now. All right, virtual PC. Okay, you should be seeing my screen again in just a second. The testing center will pop up. Hopefully I won't have any more driver issues. I know it does slow down a little bit when I'm on live meeting too. If only I had a dedicated like T1 coming into my office, that would be great. Okay, so here we are back where we started. Let me try to get us caught up really quick. So again, I'm just going to open up the manual test runner. That way you can get a view of what it looks like when we open up our manual test tool. I had been going through essentially a manual execution of a test plan. I think what I might do is just go ahead and skip to the fast forwarding since we lost a little bit of time to my image deciding to blow up on me. All right, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to choose the test case again. Let's go ahead and run that. Okay, again, we're going to minimize Visual Studio because we don't need that window just yet. That can be loading in the background. Once we start the test, now what I'm going to do this time is rather than going through and kind of manually clicking on things, because that's certainly something that's supported, but that's the scenario where ideally you'll do that just a few times, and then after that you'll be able to blow through that test very, very quickly. So it's initializing our data collectors. Okay, so one thing I want to point out is you might notice that little orange band down the right-hand side of the steps. That orange band is visually indicating to me that I actually have an action log already associated with it. So those are steps that I could fast forward through. So I'm going to go ahead and use the Shift button, and I'm going to highlight the entire set of test steps. Now when I hit that play button, it's going to go back through and it's going to rerun through those manual steps for me. So it's going to open up the browser. It's going to click on buttons. Again, remember this test is data driven, so it's going to automatically enter those data values for me. So it's going to walk through the test, and you can already probably see like, wow, this is, you know, I mean, this isn't even as fast as it could be because I'm virtualized right now. But that enables me to take a test that might normally take me 30 to 45 seconds, execute it in 3 or 4. Now this is a fairly short test case. I've talked to customers where they have hundreds of test steps. So imagine how much time that can save you. So here you might also notice, you know, hey, there's a little red check mark here. That check mark is a visual indication that you need to validate something. So you might be thinking, well, you know, I just blew through that test. Really all I did was check the navigation and make sure nothing would blow up. And that's true. For the most part, you're never going to go through an entire test case without stopping at some point because you have to validate. So what I could do is I could rerun the test. So here, let's actually reset that to get rid of the initial results that we collected. So that's going to throw away any information that it collected for that first run. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to run it in a more kind of a way that you would actually do this in the real world. So we're going to fast forward through that again, but I'm going to stop at the point where I need to validate something. I'm going to validate that it happened properly. So it's saying quantity should revert to 1. It did. That passed. And at that point, I could certainly, for however many steps I have left, I could fast forward through the rest of the steps, or in this case, I only have a couple of steps left. So I could say, okay, let's remove it from the cart. Let's go ahead and close the browser. test. And then we can end iteration and move to next. So it's going to save all the results of that particular iteration. Remember, this was a data-driven test. So there are actually 3 iterations because there's 3 rows in that data set. I could run through this test again, right? I would just do the exact same things over. I'm not going to make you watch me do it again. But I could run through this 3 times, which means I would save 3 different test result sets in Team Foundation Server. But let's pretend that something catastrophic happened, right? I'm going to open the browser, and let's say that a message popped up, or I saw something that didn't quite look right, so I needed to issue a bug to a developer. So at this point, I could decide, you know what, I need to take a screenshot. So it's going to give me this nice little Snagit type tool where it's going to enter a screenshot. I could add a note, there could be a weird message appears on screen. And now what I can do is I can say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and create a bug. It's going to open up a Team Foundation Server bug work item type, and it's going to automatically, because remember I was running those data collectors in the background, it's automatically going to add whatever relevant data I was able to collect. So for instance, I was grabbing an action log. So here's the steps that I took for that particular run, right? I was on the 2nd iteration. I'd only done a couple of steps when I issued a bug. I can also see, did I issue any results? Do I have any pass-fail information here? I can see what is the system info that I collected as part of that. Now I'm running locally, so there's just the one machine, but I can see total memory, available memory, processor speed, things like that. I can see that I'm linked back to a test case. I can see all the links that were attached. So it gives you some really great information. So here we can give it a title, right? Generally you'll get a better title than that. Assign it to somebody, save and close. I'm done. I just issued a very good bug to a developer that will give them a lot of good information, not just a message that says, hey, there was a weird error message, right? It's going to give them screenshots. If I had collected video and a lot of other information, that would all be attached as well. So at this point, I could say, you know what, I found a bug. I'm going to go ahead and move on to another test case. When I stop, it's going to publish that information back to Team Foundation Server, and now I can see the test is still in a failed status because I was not able to say that passed. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bump over into Visual Studio just to show you a couple of things on that side as well. So let me go ahead and get back to our test cases and our Team Explorer. So one of the things I want to show you really quick is the Team Explorer. There's probably some folks on the phone who've already seen this. There's a potential that you haven't seen this one yet. So the Team Explorer is essentially my view into Team Foundation Server as a developer within Visual Studio. So I can see any work item types, I can see build scripts, source control, any of the SharePoint documents, reporting, all of that's available through Visual Studio as well. I can also see what bugs have been assigned to me. So here you can see my, oh my God, a bug, the one that I just put in there, that's already popping up. So me as a developer, I have my to-do list for the day. I already have some bugs that have been assigned to me. So this was my lightweight diagnostics. I didn't collect a ton of information for this one. I want to pull up this other bug because there's actually a lot more great information in this one. So for instance, here's a bug that was issued to me a while ago, and I can pull it up and I can see that there's a video link. So if I click on that, all you're going to see is a video doing all the things that we just did. I can see that there's action logs. I can see I have IntelliTrace information that I can pull up, and this one I've actually run through 3 times. So I can actually see 3 sets of data. There's 3 videos, there's 3 action logs. There could potentially be 3 IntelliTrace logs as well. System information. Now this is interesting because I was actually running this against a different environment, so I had multiple systems that I was collecting information on. What test cases are we linked to? All links. We do keep track of all the information that was run to it. This test was run twice, so we actually have 2 different sets of test results as well. So there's a lot of great information that we're able to give everyone on the team that has access to it. Okay, so now what I wanted to show you how to do is how to automate some of those manual tests. Like I mentioned before, we have quite a few different ways to do automated testing in Visual Studio. Just in the interest of time, I picked just coded UI testing to focus on today. So again, coded UI tests, these are functional user interface tests. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new coded UI test. The first thing it's going to do is ask me, how is it that you want to actually generate that code? And again, you have two ways to do it. You can start from scratch, open up an application, click all the buttons. Again, I'm inherently lazy, so I'm going to say, you know what, there's already some great manual tests out there with action recordings that I know I can cannibalize and just reuse. So now it's going to say, okay, which test case do you want to automate? So I'm going to go back into my Team Explorer. I'm going to pull up a list of test cases. Oh, that's the wrong one, test cases. You'll notice that I have 4 different test cases. 2 of them have that little red "you can't select me" indicator. What that means is I don't actually have action logs associated with those test cases yet. It's a good visual because this is telling me, hey, I might want to go out and record that, or I might want to poke some of my manual testers and say, hey, the next time you run through that test, could you grab an action log for me so I can automate that for you? So I'm going to grab, this is the test case that I've been demoing. So remember, entering invalid data into a shopping cart, that's the one we run through 3 times. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now in this case, I'm using C#. This would also work for VB.NET. So we're done. We just turned that into an automated test case. You can see that took just a couple of seconds. If I were to run this test, you're not going to see anything too surprising here. It's going to open a browser. It's going to click through all of the various things that you saw me do manually, except now it's going to do it in an automated way through Visual Studio. So here you're going to see it's going to click model airplanes. It's going to collect the 4th copy flyer, put a weird value into there. One of the things you're going to notice is the browser closes and reopens. Now it does that because, again, this is a data-driven test. It had to run 3 times with different data for each run. So it's going to go ahead and automatically do that for me. So that test passed. Everything looks good. Now something else you may be noticing is, hey, well, yeah, the test passed, but all we really did is the same thing you did the first time you fast forwarded, right? We didn't actually stop and validate anything. We just automated the steps themselves. You do still need to automate the validation. There's not really a magical way for Visual Studio to go, oh, you were supposed to stop and look at this value and make sure it was something. So we do need to add that in. So in my case, that would be right here. So after we clicked on that white space, we needed to verify that it popped things back to being a 1. So what we would do here is say, let's go ahead and open up our coded UI recorder. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that because we don't need that right now. And let's go back in and let's find that validation and add that in. So again, remember I was clicking on airplanes, adding something to my shopping cart. I put in some weird value, clicked in my white space. This is the point where I needed to validate something. So here's where I'm going to stop and say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and grab that validation. So down here at the bottom of the screen, you'll notice we have that coded UI test builder. So the idea is the coded UI test builder is what's giving us the ability to be able to validate. Right, here we go. What did I do here? Click the wrong thing really quick. Hold on just 1 second. I got a little overzealous and I clicked too fast and then started clicking around. All right, so coded UI test builder. There we go. So what I want to do is grab this little crosshair down here at the bottom, and as you drag the crosshair over the screen, you'll notice it's starting to recognize, using the object model, things that it can validate. So what I want to do is make sure that that reverts back to 1. So when I drop it on the control, it's going to use reflection to figure out what things I can validate within that control. So in this case, I'm going to be looking at the text property, making sure it reverts back to 1. I'm going to add an assertion. So this is exactly what you would think. It's just it's a dot assert within either VB.NET or C#. You have a lot of different comparator options. You can enter a value here. Now, of course, for the kind of quick and simple demo, I'm doing a hard-coded value. This is certainly something that you could also data drive as well. I could go in and choose other attributes that I wanted to validate. I could validate other items on the screen. You know, in the interest of time, we're going to keep this kind of short and simple. Say we're going to validate quantity add and generate. It's going to generate that code back into that coded UI test. For now, that's all we're going to add. Here you'll see there's the function that I added. If I were to go to definition, you're really not going to be, oh, there we go, hold on. You're going to notice it's not really anything all that surprising, right? It's just an assert statement, R equal. Here's where you could go in and actually substitute something you're pulling from a database as opposed to just being hard-coded. But now if we were to rerun the test, you're going to see the same thing happen, except now instead of just kind of flipping through the steps, it's going to go through the steps, it's going to perform some validation, and then it's going to give me a pass-fail result. So again, it's still going to go through it 3 times. The difference now is it's actually doing some nice validation. So again, right now we're doing this in kind of a simple web application. You could certainly do this on a WinForms app. You can do this on WPF. You can also do this, again, on Silverlight 4 in browser. So there's some new support being added. You know, every day they're working on kind of adding support and its extensibility hooks. There is a lot of extensibility for coded UI test method, again, because at the end of the day, it's just .NET code. You can do quite a bit with it to extend out the model. Okay, so one other thing I did want to talk about, we had talked a little bit about lab management and data collection, so I did want to show you where you set some of that up as well. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of Visual Studio for now. We're going to go back into Microsoft Test Professional, except this time I'm going to flip over to the Lab Center. So again here, I'm looking at my lab capabilities. So again, I don't have lab management fully implemented on this image, so I'm not going to be able to create any virtual instances, but I can walk you through some of the functionality, and we can certainly set up a future demo to walk through the lab stuff as well. So here I can do things like I want to define a new environment, so I could connect it to physical machines. I could define virtual environments. But one of the things that I specifically wanted to talk about is test settings. So for instance, when I was going through that manual test case and I had to choose my test settings for data collection, you might remember that I chose lightweight diagnostics. Again, that's just a pre-configured profile that says, if I choose lightweight diagnostics, anytime I run that test, I'm going to be collecting the action log and system information, and in this case, just on my local machine. If I were running a lab type of environment, you might see 3, 4, maybe 10 different machines being defined here, and each one of those might have a different set of data that's being collected. If I go up to full diagnostics, you'll see that, you know, for my machine, I'm collecting a much more robust set of information. So let's show you what that actually looks like when you go in to set it up as well. So for instance, I'm going to go ahead and edit my full diagnostics profile. So now that I'm in here, I'm going to say, here's my machines. Again, in this case, I only have one. I could certainly have multiple machines specified here. For each machine that I choose, I can then decide what data that I want to collect. Now you might be wondering, I wonder if that list is extensible, because while there's some really cool data collection I can do there, I can think of a few other things that I might want to collect. It's just an iDataCollector class. You can absolutely, you can implement that class. You can add custom code. You can add completely new data collection types just by taking advantage of the code that's out there. And we've got some great samples on MSDN of how to do that. Now, for each set of data collectors, you'll notice that there's some configuration options. So, for instance, when you're collecting action logs on the client, one of the things that people will often ask me is, hey, you know, if I'm doing a manual test, and I'm doing data collection and it's keeping track of everything that's happening on my desktop, what happens if I'm running, say, Communicator, and someone pops up a message and says, hey, Ange, we're going to Chipotle for lunch, you know, you want to go with us? You don't want that to be recorded as part of your test plan, right? Because you probably clicked OK or maybe sent a message back, and you certainly don't want that to be part of the playback. You can go through and actually customize what gets collected and tell it to ignore things. So, for instance, you know, I could say, you know, collect all applications, or I could say only collect certain applications, or ignore Instant Messenger, ignore OneNote, ignore Outlook. You can also say things like have a delay, capture any user delay if it's more than a certain number of seconds. There's a lot of things that you can do here. And that's going to be true for a lot of your different methods. So, you know, you can imagine for your event log, you may not want to grab every single message that goes to every event log. So you can go through and specify which logs you want to grab, how many messages you want to save. You notice there's IntelliTrace. Network emulation is an interesting one because this is where you can actually use a network profile to simulate traffic conditions. So let's make sure that things still respond the way they should if they're on 3G versus dial-up versus a WAN. And down the line, video. Video is interesting because a lot of people get worried about video. They think to themselves, wow, you know, video that could be pretty huge. Am I going to need to invest in, you know, some 100 terabyte SanDisks to manage all that information in TFS? Well, you can absolutely throttle that down. So I could say, you know, I want my quality to be lower. I want the bit rate to be higher or lower, the frame rate. You can actually adjust things so that the video won't necessarily be HD quality. You know, you'll be watching it on your widescreen TV, but it's enough that you can see what was happening on the screen. This is also an interesting checkbox here. A lot of people wonder, why would you ever want to save a video recording if a test passes? Generally, don't you just want to save that recording if there's a failure or if something goes wrong? The reason for this is we do have a lot of customers that, because of auditing and compliance and things like that, they also need to be able to prove that things did work. So they have to prove that requirements were satisfied, that you know, things worked the way they said it did. So we do give you the ability to save that as well. Now, one of the another cool add-on that came out after we released last year was a tool that you can use to actually go into Team Foundation Server after the fact. So after you've been running tests and after you've been collecting diagnostic information, so that you can essentially turn on the ability to go in and clean up after yourself. So you could say, if I have a test case that's been sitting around for 6 months and it's passing, I don't care anymore about the video. I want to go ahead and throw that out so I can recover some of that storage space. Okay, so really quickly, we have a little less than 20 minutes left, so I'm going to return back quickly to talk a little bit about some of the stuff in MSDN I wanted to make sure people were aware of, and then I'll go through and see if there are any more questions that people have. So let me switch back. There we go. So something else I always like to focus on, because like I said before, I'm always surprised at how many people have MSDN but don't necessarily fully take advantage of it. So we have MSDN, which is, oh, apparently we're running over. I'm sorry about that. I thought we had until 2 o'clock. So these are going to be shared out. I'll spend just a minute on this, and then we'll give it back to Brian. So I wanted to make sure everybody knew that you have e-learning, technical support, priority, a lot of different things available to you through MSDN. I do have something on my blog that I do believe I have a link to it in here that'll walk you through how to take advantage of training, how to take advantage of your Azure benefits, everything like that. The last plug I'll make before I drop off is a good friend of mine who's someone who would be a great person to do a lab management session in the future is Randy Pagels. He lives in Detroit, Michigan in the U.S. as well. He's got a great site called the Team System Cafe that has fantastic tips and training and upcoming events as well. So I'll go ahead and drop it off for Q&A. It looks like people are dropping off. I didn't realize I was over time, so I do apologize for that. So I'll leave it open in case anyone has any questions. You can go ahead and type them in the Q&A panel. Otherwise, just a quick recap of my contact info. You can certainly contact me through LIDNUG, through Brian, or directly at angelab@microsoft.com. So I want to thank everybody and Brian for having me on today, and hopefully you have a great rest of the week and a fantastic weekend.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Angela. That was a very, very excellent walkthrough of the capabilities of TFS and Visual Studio Test Manager. Yeah, and also I want to apologize for running over time here. I was sitting here, got a little bit too engrossed into the content, and unfortunately I lost track of time as well. But Angela, thank you very, very much. This was a very enriching presentation. There was a lot of things in there that I feel I can use in my day-to-day life, so to speak, and I'm sure a lot of members did. To all members, thank you very much for turning up. I quickly just want to highlight a little thing. Our Eventbrite profile page has just been updated. Eventbrite have now updated the profile feature on Eventbrite, and you can now not only see upcoming but also past events. There is our Facebook and Twitter integration on that page as well, and you can see it in the middle here is lidnugevents.eventbrite.com, and there is subscription parts in there. You can subscribe to RSS feeds and calendars and so on, so it's very easy to now keep up to date with what's coming with LIDNUG in the future. Anyways, thank you very much, everybody. The recording will be available as soon as the events are uploaded at the usual place at www.lidnug.org/archives.aspx.